Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dust lasers, peasants, vassals, debt slaves. I'm a useful idiot, and today I want to talk about how the rich seem to think that the poor are rich. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a minute. First of all, we'll talk about mega corporations. And in this case, two stories that have come out recently, one about McDonald's and this budget they have, and then also this ad campaign by the Koch brothers. And both of these stories show that the elites have a distorted view about how much wealth and how much money is available to the poor working class, the welfare society, the working middle class. And we've always known that corporations and people like the Koch brothers think that we're all pretty much scum. As Kissinger would characterize us as useless heaters. But nonetheless, corporations like us to work for them for as little as possible and spend a lot of time kissing their ass. And they also like us to buy all their shit. But that said, we're pretty much expendable. But this fantasy world that they live in and think the world is like in America, certainly working at McDonald's is a pretty interesting view. So let's get right to it. So the McDonald's Visa website has a proposed budget that somebody, for example, that works at McDonald's can use to get ahead in life and actually be able to save some money. And the problems start right off the bat because they factor in your first job at McDonald's is going to make you $1,105 a month after taxes, because the average hourly wage at McDonald's is $8.25 an hour. But the fatal flaw is they factor in a second job right off the bat in the budget. So you will get another $955 from a second job. And when you do the math, it turns out that this dream budget for McDonald's suggests you can get by in life working 70 hours a week, 10 hours a day. And certainly without going into the complexities of having a lifestyle like that. And so your monthly net with those two jobs is roughly about $2,000 a month. And then they budget it out with other at $100, electric at $90, cable and phone at $100, heating at $50, health insurance at $20, car and home insurance at $100, car payment at $150, mortgage and rent at $600, and savings at $100. With monthly expenses $1,310. So they basically theorize that you have $750 a month left over for spending, and that roughly you have $25 a day. But some of the other flaws, of course, in this budget are working at that level, making about $28,000 a year, $20,000 a year, somewhere in that range. How you're going to save $100 a month is a mystery. Having rent at $600 certainly is not going to happen in most major metropolitan areas across the country. So they'll factor commuting costs should you have to try and find some place for $600 rent. And then the idea that there's $600 mortgages out there. Well, of course, a lot of rural areas in the United States and places like Detroit, there are mortgages that low, but car payment seems reasonable. Car home insurance is fairly reasonable. Health insurance is interesting because they put in $20 a month, and yet even McDonald's own insurance costs employees roughly $63 a month if it's available to them at all. So that's pretty hilarious. So then you have $750 a month left over, $25 a day, and that's for food, all your food, gas, clothes, shoes, laundry, cleaning items, medication, dental, travel, entertainment, everything else. So in this day and age, in this society, to think that will fly, got another thing coming, plus the fact that a lot of people that would be working with a budget like this and work at McDonald's have families. So this money has to be stretched even further. And interestingly enough, of course, your monthly expenses at the bare minimum, and even distorted in this McDonald's budget, the monthly expenses come out to $1,310. And of course, the income from just working at McDonald's is only $1,105. So right off the bat, they're admitting that if you just work at McDonald's, you're going to come up $200 short every month on just making your basic expenses, and that's not having money left over for anything else. So this is a true fantasy world. And then they've got the nerve to go on to list ways you can look for ways to save money. The first one is, whenever possible, use public transportation or carpool. And this is coming from a class of people that probably have forgotten how to drive a car because they get chauffeured around in a limousine wherever they go. And then the second one is, consider walking or riding a bike when running errands. And that's as opposed to the people who wrote this budget, who send their butlers and nannies and valets out to do even the simplest of errands, and don't even raise their own kids. Number 3 is plan meals in advance. So you have to plan to have pork and beans or just beans. And this, once again, comes from a class who can order whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they are. Price has no effect. Number 4, borrow books and movies from the library. So they don't want you to rent movies. They don't want you to get Netflix. They don't want you to buy books. And so they want you to borrow books and movies from the library. And I actually agree with that one to a certain extent. I think people who don't have the wherewithal should consider that route. But I think a lot of them do already. And a lot of those households might not even be that interested in books. Number 5, shop with a list. So they want you to go out and just buy what you need, even though their whole corporate mantra is to get you to buy all kinds of stuff you don't need by flashy displays and impulse placement. Number 6, pay down debt as quickly as possible. Once again, of course, in a society that increases debt and encourages everyone to incur as much debt as possible. And number 7, try not to use ATMs outside of your system. So that's kind of funny. Yeah, you can save fees, $2 or $3 here and there. For just try not to use ATMs out of your system. And then the plan goes on. The McDonald's plan goes on to encourage everyone to set up a direct deposit with a paycheck and put it on a payroll card. But interestingly enough, they get talk about debt slaves. They get charged $10 to $30 a month in monthly charges to have these payroll cards. And so that's hilarious enough and disturbing enough. But let's go on to the Koch brothers. So they have a new ad campaign, and basically they're suggesting that in the worldwide scheme of things, that somebody who makes $34,000 a year is in the top 1%, using the lingo of the Occupy movement. So he's saying that pretty much everybody in America that makes roughly $35,000 a year is part of the 1% and doesn't really deserve any subsidies or cronyism and that sort of thing. And this is coming from the Koch brothers, a combined worth of who knows how much. I think each Koch brother is worth about $40 billion, and then their combined assets are worth more than that. So they're lecturing people that make $35,000 a year and saying how they're in the top 1% globally and should count their blessings. But they forget that that kind of figure is arrived at by comparing it to somebody that makes $1 a day in some of the third world countries around the world. So the fact that we meet somewhere in the middle of that is nothing to boast about. But let's get to a quote from a press release about this ad campaign. Quote, "We want to do a better job of raising up the disadvantaged and the poorest in this country rather than saying, oh, we're just fine now." We're not saying that at all. What we're saying is we need to analyze all these additional policies, these subsidies, this cronyism, this avalanche of regulations, all these things that are creating a culture of dependency. And like permitting to start a business in many cities, to drive a taxi cab, to become a hairdresser, anything that people with limited capital can do to raise themselves up, they keep throwing obstacles in their way. And so we've got to clear those out, or the minimum wage, or anything else that reduces the mobility of labor. So, wow. what a statement from the Koch brothers. First of all, interesting for them to talk about people in the middle class and lower middle class wage bracket as having the advantages of subsidies and cronyism, when the Koch brothers are certainly the epitome of subsidies and cronyism. And then he's talking about how much people like that need regulations out of the way in order to prosper and develop businesses, maybe like these people that use this budget at the McDonald's. And to think that there's just an avalanche of regulations in the way when you want to start a business or drive a taxi cab or become a hairdresser, I'd say there's a relative. What he is driving at more is that he needs regulations out of the way so the Koch brothers can expand all of their empires. So here we have just more attacks on the middle class, the working class, this fantasy world that the elites and the wealthy live in, and think of what life is like. For example, you look at that McDonald's budget, and what if they have some serious health problems, and you have a bill that's tagged on there that adds another $100, $200 a month for all of your expenses? What if your car breaks down, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you end up having to buy a new car, maybe even before the old one's paid off? Insurance only covers part of it. What if you have an accident? Your insurance premium is a lot higher than the set amount. I mean, there's any number of emergencies, getting sick and missing time from work, missing a couple days from work. This adds up when you're in the working class or when you're in the middle class. And then this attack on the minimum wage. In some ways, as a conservative, independent conservative, I agree that the minimum wage has some flaws. One of the flaws is that there are potentially places that could pay less and give people that don't have that many skills access to some jobs and some work. But it's self-evident just saying that having a working class that makes so much far below livable wages certainly doesn't address the problems. But the real heart of the problem goes back to not necessarily minimum wage, it's the buying power of the dollar. So you can go back and look at the Federal Reserve again as one of the problems in this quotient. If the dollar hadn't lost 98% of its value since the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, then prevailing wages would afford a pretty decent lifestyle. And instead of minimum wages, let's talk about readdressing the tax system in this country as well. And my bottom line on this, on top of everything else, is that these corporate mega entities like McDonald's and these corporate mucky mucks, grand potentates like the Koch brothers, who have every ounce of cronyism and subsidy available to them from our government, the way that Americans pay for with their tax dollars. And not only that, these corporate entities get all of this advertising written off as business expenses, this saturation of marketing to get spent on 24/7 media blitzes, scientifically and precisely designed to get people to buy all kinds of shit they don't need, don't really want, and can't afford. And yet that's the same corporations that are lecturing them now on living within a budget. And debt is actively encouraged. In fact, it's if you want to, you can get debt and then you can supersize it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one. 2,